Okay, so we tend to talk a lot about right-hand picking technique, really, with Gypsy Jazz, but I just wanted to sort of cover a bit of left-hand technique as well. And this might jar a bit if you've had some kind of formal lessons, especially classical lessons, but I don't want to sort of present it as a kind of everything you know is wrong sort of thing, because I think that's not necessarily very helpful. I'll just quiet that door out. So we have a very blustery day here in Crystal Palace today, and everything's creaking, and it's actually very nice to be inside. So we're talking about this kind of technique which I learnt when I was starting, and it's this kind of thing where every finger has its own fret, and it's a great technique because you can finger every note independently, and it's a great technique for getting kind of every note separately articulated. But I have to say, when I started getting into like the older jazz guitar players, like Django of course, but also people like Wes and Charlie Christian, I start to notice a lot of them use more like a three-fingered technique, like I would expect a blues or rock guitar player to use, where you stick your thumb over the top and you're kind of bending like this. Charlie Christian or whatever. And that is, that's something which works very well for Charlie Christian. Hopefully I've demonstrated a bit of that technique on my video of his solo one, I Found a New Baby. I didn't manage to completely play it with three fingers, but hopefully it gives you... That is my best guess as to what fingering he was using when he was playing that solo. I mean, other people may differ, and I'd love to hear some alternative suggestions if anybody has any. But that's how I hear it, or how I think it works, and how it feels comfortable to play for me. So I mean, we got this three-finger technique, and this technique comes with several things. So the first thing is that your wrist is absolutely straight like this. It's very healthy because of that. An issue with playing that with your thumb behind is that you can bend your wrist, and if your wrist is like this, then you need to make sure that you put the neck like that, because if your wrist is going to be bent, then you're going to be causing problems with your tendons passing through the carpal tunnel. There's like literally a tunnel in your wrist, and the tendons go through into the fingers like that. And if you compress that, if you like bend your wrist, what happens is you squish the tunnel. It kind of shuts, and then what you get is your tendons rubbing against the inside of it, and it can cause inflammation, and that really hurts, and it means you can't play the guitar. Okay, so don't do that, please, because I've been there. It's a really dangerous thing. I mean, you can sort of subvert it by kind of pulling the guitar up a bit higher, perhaps by using a guitar rest between your knee and the guitar itself. It's probably more healthy than using a footstool, because footstool kind of twists your spine. But I think that kind of tells you something about classical technique. The fact that you have to deform your body in order to play classical guitar. It's about dominating the instrument, right? It's about going like, here's the instrument, and now I'm going to, make sure I can play Bach, which was never meant to be played on the guitar. It wasn't even meant to be played on the lute, really. I'm going to play it on that instrument now, and it's going to work, and I'm absolutely going to make it work. And something like, I mean, I know it's not really fashionable as a Bach performer, but I love Segovia's playing so much I don't really care. Of course Julian Bream and all that lot, were able to do it. But, it's not natural to the instrument. And classical technique, to some extent, is kind of trying to go beyond the instrument, I think it's fair to say. Whereas I feel like the gypsy jazz guitarists and the rock players and all the guys who use three fingers and the thumb over the top, and a lot of the jazz players as well, are working with the guitar. They're not trying to make it transparent. They're not trying to dominate it and make it into something where you can play all this challenging contrapuntal material. Although the guitar can play polyphony and there's nothing wrong with it, Anyway, I'm kind of digressing here a bit, so I'm going to get to the point. So the other thing is that your fingers are going to be flat, whereas they're not going to be playing like this so much, perhaps. You're going to be flatter fingered, which I've never really mastered. I still kind of play with my fingertips a bit. And, for rhythm guitar and stuff, that's great because you can mute. In gypsy jazz guitar, we use a lot of thumb fretting for a lot of the chord shapes. So on. So that's kind of part of the style as well. So the problem is, I guess, really, when it comes to arpeggios and things, because, I mean, I always thought, oh, you've got to play arpeggios like this. You've got to have, like, these stretch thing going on. you notice what I'm doing there is I'm playing like a position, then I'm shifting up. Not very well, but that's what I'm doing. Playing a position, shifting up and coming down again, you know. And that's kind of the movement. Now, what we could do is we could explore the way that Django, who only had 2 working fingers on one hand, on his left hand, how he could finger an arpeggio like that. And this is the kind of thing I've come up with. Now what you can see is that, I mean, first of all I think it sounds much better, but also the other thing is that there's a fluid kind of grace to the movement. Much more pleasant than this kind of herky-jerky, now I've got to move my hand there, and it's all stretched out and awkward to start off with kind of proper technique. And I think this is something which is worth exploring, especially if you're kind of used to doing things the other way. Another great arpeggio is, you know, I mean, this would be easier for me to play, by the way, with 3 fingers. I'd probably play like this normally. But it is possible with 2 fingers, which is interesting, because 2 fingers can't stretch. Oops, sorry, 2 fingers can't stretch very far. That's the better V sign for people living in the UK. Whereas, you know, 3 fingers can stretch a bit more, but not nearly as much as even with that. You know, so it's kind of a different. You know, you just can't stretch with that technique. So, I mean, with 3 fingers, it's a little bit more comfortable, but the same rules basically apply. Here's another example of an arpeggio which uses a similar kind of fingering. You know, you can use diminished arpeggios. I can't do that very well, so I normally play them like this on my little finger, you see. So there you go. So old habits die hard. And I haven't thrown away all of my classical knowledge to play the guitar, because if I was to do that I'd have to completely relearn. And I don't really have the time to do that, to be honest. I mean, relearning my right hand technique is enough. But I do get a lot out of exploring these possibilities, and I would urge you to do the same. I think the big thing to realise is that it's not necessary to ever stretch to play single note lines. It's not. I mean, you can if you want, if that's your vibe, especially if you want to get every note really super separately articulated. Like, I would think of that more as a pianistic way to articulate on the guitar, whereas this is more like, for me, like a wind instrument, or perhaps a violin or something. That's a different conception, I think, of how the guitar could sound. And again, I really want to stress that I'm not saying that one thing sounds better or worse, although this definitely sounds better to me than the other. And it might just be down to the fact that I'm just not really very good at the other technique. But for me, that has a kind of, it's got a kind of vocality to it. Ideas for practicing, well, this is something I actually find very difficult, but it's probably a really good idea to get used to shifting along the neck. So your first step could be, you know, just playing a G major scale along one string. Sorry, let's try that again. You know, then playing it in thirds. Now, here's the challenge, to do it without looking. I'm absolutely rubbish at that. That's something which I could definitely work on, because it's about developing this kind of relationship, so you don't have to look, so you just know, okay, I'm going to change position and move this way or that way, and without looking, that's something which I'm not very good at, which, you know, I think, again, it would improve my sight reading if I was able to do this, because I just be looking at the music and then I'll be shifting up here, you know, and it wouldn't be a problem. So, you know, it's really about, you know, learning how to shift and getting out of position, and understanding the advantages of putting your thumb over the top for rhythm. And also the fact that if you use the strong fingers, you can do this side-to-side vibrato, none of which is really in the classical technique book, really. I mean, they don't play like that. But we do, because this is the kind of music we play. So, if you're interested in playing this music and getting the sounds, then I would seriously suggest investigating some of this. Again, I will stress that I don't use this. I don't use only three-fingered technique, and I do actually play a lot more positionally than a lot of gypsy jazz guys. Simply, as I say, because that's how I grew up learning. But at the same time, I've got an awful lot out of exploring these other options. So I would suggest perhaps having a go at the same and seeing what you can discover, and it may well help you playing. Thanks very much for watching.